This podcast could potentially have adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly the possibility of sexual content. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I am your host, Erica Lance, who is currently surrounded by cat towers because the construction is still going on here in my house, so invaded by them. My co-host today is the amazing Daniela Orsino, and our guest today is Lee Bukowski. Did I say that correctly? Because I realized I probably should have asked.
That's okay. Yes, you did. Bukowski.
Bukowski. Yay. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking. So as I often say this, I went in my fridge and I found a bottle of Viking blood mead. Viking blood mead. It's very cool. And I had a friend give me 2 cups. One of them says Down the Rabbit Hole, which is this one. And the other one says I drink and I know things. And I wanted to use that one, but because we've been backing up, for the life of me, I cannot find the drink and know thing. So instead we're going down the rabbit hole with my Viking blood mead. Danielle, what are you drinking?
I'm boring today. I just have my chai latte in my Cancer cup.
Ooh, the signs. I like it. Okay. Lee, what are you drinking?
Okay, so my drink of choice is an old fashioned, but it's a little early for Lee to start drinking old fashioned. So I made a weak, smaller one. So I'm going to call it, instead of an old fashioned, I'm going to call it a middle-aged fashion.
Ooh, I like that.
Nice.
Right?
I like that. Cheers.
Cheers.
So I realized I've let this mead be in my fridge for a while, and I think it's gotten more potent. So just warning everybody in advance of that, because I took a sip and it was like lightning down my spine. Okay, so Lee, before I get too wasted, what do you write for the audience at large that may not know you?
I write contemporary fiction. So, the genres are always a little fuzzy. I hear that women's fiction is kind of like, we're not supposed to be saying that anymore. I don't know. I have to do a little research on that. But I think my work is considered women's fiction, but also contemporary and literary fiction. And so I published my first novel, my debut novel, in June.
Okay.
I happen to have a copy of it right here. It is called A Week of Warm Weather. And yeah, so this is my debut novel, and I'm working on my second one, but so this is my baby, and it just came out in June.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. What a pretty cover.
Pretty cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so if that is your debut, oh my God, I almost said debut album, debut novel. Yeah.
That mead is pretty strong.
Yeah, it's doing well.
Yeah.
For me. It's okay. I never drink ever, right, people? I'm just kidding. So your debut novel, what made you decide to publish a book at this point in your life?
That's the question of the day. And I think that my answer is, people always say, did you always want to be a writer? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I always wanted to be a writer, but I definitely have always loved books, have loved reading. I've had the idea for this story in my head for probably 15 years. And I think when I finally decided, so I'm a recovering English teacher. So I taught 7th grade English.
I love that.
Right. And so I taught 7th grade English in my previous lifetime. And, I'm not one of those people who can just say, this is my job, it's going to be my job until I drop over dead. So there was always kind of this little voice in my ear saying, I loved my job. I really, truly loved it. I believe it's a calling. I loved it. But, there was something else for me. So I kept thinking, I'd really love to write a novel. I'd love to write a novel. But I felt like I didn't really have the training. And so I ended up leaving my teaching career, getting a master's degree in creative writing. And then I thought, okay, So now I have some tools in my toolbox. And I was really fortunate because the master's program that I was in, at the end of it, the thesis part of the program was to write the first 30,000 words of a novel, right? So it's like sink or swim, right?
Okay.
So it really motivated me to keep going. So that was in 2017. But to answer your original question, I think when I was younger, my book has a lot of stuff in it that is very sensitive. Okay, it deals with abandonment issues, generational trauma, addiction, marriage, and so I think that when
So you wrote something very lighthearted to start
I
off
was
with.
gonna
very
say,
light, very light,
almost like a
as
comedy.
the cover suggests, you see the sun and the trees, but when you really, if you look up close, you can sort of see how it's like a window and see the cracks here. So you're like, oh, a week of warm weather. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, something's going on there. So, I mean, and the book does have, it's about a great family, a fun family, but they've got all this stuff. And so I think that when I was younger, I didn't really have the life experience that was necessary to write a book that tackled the subjects in my book. And I really believe that. And I think it is one of the things that kept me from doing it for so long. So I think the combination of, getting the degree, the master's degree in fiction writing, but combined with just kind of, sort of effing up a lot in my life and like stumbling through life and making bad choices and, being in bad situations and good situations. But I think it was really the life experience that I needed that. And that's the reason I think if I had tried to write this book in, when I was much younger, I mean, I do lie about my age, but even if I was like in my 30s, I really don't think I had the life experience necessary to treat the subjects in my book with the sort of the weight and the sensitivity that they deserve.
No, that makes
That's
sense.
fair.
Yeah, no, totally. So,
Right.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Go ahead, Danielle. And
No, I was going to say, I just think that's fair. And I think it shows growth as well, and maturity to know when you can take on those subjects and write them with sensitivity and wisdom versus jumping into it and being like, heck yeah, I'm 20. Let me talk all about the life experience I have and write it in a way that people look at it and not take it seriously. So
Right.
I
To
kind
have
of
people
applaud
say,
that.
well, what do you know about all this? You're 20. And that's not to say that young writers don't write
No,
great books.
of course.
But I honestly, as I kind of went through my life and experienced different things, I thought, I know what I do. I connect with characters in books, right? So and we know when we're being bamboozled, right? And every genre has its thing, but like if you're writing about something, even though my book does have some humor and it has some lightheartedness, and like I said, it's a fun family. The family owns a diner, so like diner stuff is all fun. But I still felt exactly that, Danielle, that like, there are going to be people going through or having gone through some of the things that I'm writing about. And so I really, I really got to a point in my life where I felt like I could tackle those things with, with some authenticity.
Understood.
I think that's very, very cool. What about, you said you were a recovering English teacher, and I love that. I know quite a few English teachers.
I should have one of those medallions or something, right?
You should. There should be some sort of like brooch or something that
Badge of honor.
Yeah, like
Exactly,
metal.
right?
Yeah. But a lot of people who go into English as a career, whether it's teaching English or they end up teaching English because they wanted to be a writer. You didn't start there. You wanted to be a teacher to begin with?
Yes, I did. It's funny. I had, I think when I was going to college, part of my brain was like, ooh, I'd love to be, a journalist or even a TV journalist. But, it just didn't seem feasible. I don't know why. I kind of thought, well, that doesn't really seem feasible. But I just loved English class. I loved writing. I loved reading. And I actually had a teacher who inspired me. She's actually one of my very good friends to this day. We ended up working at the same school. And so I think yes, definitely wanted to be a teacher before I knew I wanted to be a writer. Right, teaching teaching is really, it's really an interesting, like I said, I do think it's a calling, but again, I knew when to get out, I didn't want to just be like, I never wanted my kids sitting in the classroom with a teacher who's like counting the number of years till they can collect their pension kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I definitely was like, listen, I did that. I loved it, but then it was time to move on. But definitely the teaching, the wanting to be a teacher definitely came before wanting to be a writer, or at least knowing that I wanted to be a writer.
That makes sense. And then what made you choose the subject matter you chose for your book?
So the book is fiction. However, as most debut authors, I think will tell you, or I don't know about most, maybe you do this, so you maybe there are threads of my life and experiences in this book. And so specifically, so I have kind of there's a main storyline, and then I have two minor storylines. Okay, so some of the book is completely made up. And then other parts of it are things that are taken from my life. So, okay. Yes. So, specifically something that happened to me in my childhood, which is where the generational trauma. So without, I don't know if I don't necessarily want to give spoilers, because I'd love people to
don't give spoilers. Yeah.
But so the, and so I think when I went, so, then, you sort of, you go through your life, and as an adult, I started to, make some mistakes. Maybe everything has gone perfect in your lives. I hope it has. It has not in mine.
I hope it has for the listeners too. Again, not my situation.
No, nor mine. I think nor most people. And so what I ended up doing was taking a look at my life and going, why am I getting myself in these situations? Like what is it? What have I not dealt with that maybe is causing me to make some bad choices and that kind of thing? And so I thought, what, I'm going to incorporate. So I had this idea for the book, and then it actually came to me as I was writing to incorporate, this event that affected me so profoundly in my childhood. And I actually was able to work through a lot of it, as I was writing my book, which was really, really kind of cool for me. And at that point I was in counseling, which I think everyone should be in counseling, right? I mean, if anyone tells you they shouldn't be in counseling, they need it the most, right? Counseling is good. You take care of your body, you get your physical, and so definitely you should be cleaning those cobwebs out of your head. And so at that point, I was exploring some of those things. And then I realized as I was writing the book, what? I think I can really just sort of unpack a lot of this stuff through the writing of this novel. So I kind of merged those storylines. So the book follows my protagonist, whose name is Tessa, just kind of on this journey where she's, this young wife and mother, and it looks like she has it all. But, she hits a wall. She encounters this awful problem with her husband. And so it sets her on this path. And this is where I got the idea, what, I'm going to bring the whole, from my childhood into this. And so it kind of sets her on this path where she not only has to figure out what the hell's wrong. Oh, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, you can say what the fuck. I do it all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So she's got to figure out what the fuck's wrong with him. And then also she's thinking, okay, what am I doing to contribute to, all of this stuff that I keep getting myself into?
Very
well,
cool.
I love that. Absolutely. So, okay. So now that you've done this, now that you've done book one, and you're working on book two, what is book two?
So book two has nothing to do with book one.
Okay.
I get a lot of people clamoring for the sequel to book one. Not doing it, not going there.
Really?
Yeah, I just feel like the parts of the book the parts of A Week of Warm Weather that do relate to my own life, I feel like to write the sequel would be maybe telling other people's lives, things, that if I were to continue it, authentically, that maybe I would be writing some things that, aren't my story to tell. So I have a whole different idea. My writing, I always come back to the same thing. I write about family, about relationships, about what is it that you're looking for, you can't seem to get it, and what is standing in your way, and what are you going to do about it? You know, so it's kind of, it's going to be another book where, you know, the protagonist is a woman, and she is, you know, she's looking for something, and she's just trying to figure out how to get it, and she's got a lot of things standing in her way.
Oh,
I'm just based right now. I have the outline, and I've started working on. I have the first only chapter or two actually written, and they're terrible, but that's okay, because when you first start writing, it's like you have to just, it's sort of like this vomiting, you know, onto the keyboard, and then you go back and you go, okay, so this is what I want, this is where I want to go, but I have to like flesh out my characters, and you know, I have to give it dimension. So I feel like when I feel like writing a novel, at first it's sort of one-dimensional, because you've just got to like put it out there, but then you have to go back and add the layers, and add the personality, and add the things that are going to make readers actually connect with the character. I feel like women's fiction is very character driven more than plot driven, right? Because we're on this journey with this character who is just like hitting wall after wall, you know, so you get invested. So that's kind of where I am with the second one. I've got I know the beginning and I know the end. I have to work on the middle.
It's the middle.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us, I don't know. I think every author actually has sort of a different journey. Like, can they actually get it started?
Yeah.
Good. They got it started. They're good to go. But sometimes the getting it started is like the biggest hang up. And then you have the, can I, like, what the hell is happening to these characters? I know where I want it to end, but you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and a good day of writing is like, oh, you know, you just feel like it's like a B12 shot. You're just like, oh my God, this is so great. And you're just like, almost, you know, not even your feet don't touch the ground. A bad day of writing is like, you know, who am I kidding? I can't do this. I need to go sell shoes at Macy's because I have no idea what I'm doing. So, you know, it's this kind of like that.
So after book 2, what are your writing goals then? Now that you've started this journey, like, where do you want to go?
I'd love to keep writing. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, as I said, I do lie about my age. You can try to look it all up, but I'll deny it. But it's one of those things where, you know, I actually felt like when I was going to write this first book, actually my daughter, I have 2 daughters, and I was talking to my older daughter and I said, oh my gosh, you know, by the time I finish this book, you know, I'm going to be 50 or what. And she's like, Mom, you're gonna be 50 whether you write this book or not. So like, just shut your pie hole and write it. So, and you know, it was kind of really good advice, because I think we have a tendency to think like, okay, I'm too old to start a new career. I'm too old to start something new. And you know, and so I think we all sort of do that. But so my goals, I just feel like I've met authors who started writing when they were 60, who published their first book when they're 75, who, you know, so I just feel like I would love to have a career as a writer. So, you know, it's hard. So kind of separate from that, I've also joined, I'm part of a group. It's actually a Facebook group called Bookish Road Trip. Maybe you're familiar with it.
Yes, because we've had many of your members on here and we love
Fabulous group.
Yes.
And so I have just started this year in January as their roadshow host. So I host an interactive panel of authors, and we have a different theme every month. So, you know, so as far as my goals, I'd love to keep writing, but I also love the idea of helping all of us. We help each other. So promoting other authors, you know, meeting authors who will help promote me. It's a fabulous community. Writers are, you know, there's not the backstabbing that you have in a lot of businesses. You know, none of us is like, I want people to buy my book, but I don't want them to buy her book. You know, we want people to buy everybody's books. And so I'd love to continue this sort of work, this marketing. And like I said, I host this interactive panel, and, you know, so just kind of see where that kind of thing takes me. I'm not afraid to like be on camera or talk to people. As I said, I taught 7th grade, so I'm really not afraid of anyone. So like, you know,
Well, I hope not after teaching 7th grade.
no, because
gonna
the
say.
audiences are much, you teach 7th grade, you have to worry like nothing's hanging out of your nose or your fly isn't down. Like, you know, it's a much friendlier crowd.
Oh, that's awesome. And you know, you mentioned the Book is Show. Here's the thing, as a community, we all need to be supportive of each other. Not a single one of us as an author will ever feed a reader enough books. And so
Exactly.
you have to share, because I always say this, we will never run out of readers who are interested, readers who change genres they like. I mean, I think if we all think back to what we read when we were younger and what we're reading now, I'm not saying there aren't some similarities, but I think we all grow as readers too,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and what we
you know,
want.
absolutely. And as an avid reader myself, I'm not going to wake up one day and be like, that's it, I've read enough books, I don't want any more books, you know. So like, I don't, you know, I haven't come across, you know, I've had wonderful mentors and authors who've helped me. And I hope, you know, my hope is, and actually with my panel, I'm able to do that, have some people on, but you know, they're all great. You know, nobody's kind of like, hey, I'm going to hold back on the advice because I really don't want you to sell too many books, you know. So it's great to be part of a community that is like that, because as we know, in a lot of businesses, there's a lot of competition.
That's true. And if anybody ever does say that to you, I think you should just punch them in the face. Like, seriously, if another
Agreed.
author said, oh, I don't want you to sell, but I would, oh,
Yeah,
hell hath no fury.
right. Yeah. So I have
That
not
would-
met that person yet. I hope I don't.
Yeah, no. And you know, it's kind of true. Like I tell people all the time that, you know, approach your favorite authors, go talk to them. The majority of them are so thrilled to meet fans and stuff like that.
Yes.
There is
that's
a
true.
very tiny percent of humans that think they're above their fans, though.
Right.
And yeah, not fun. Not
Mm.
fun when that happens at
No.
all.
No.
At all. So you're doing women's fiction. What made you choose the genre that you're in versus writing like a romance or a sci-fi story? Or did you always read that kind of fiction?
Yeah, I'm drawn to women's fiction and you know, contemporary book club fiction, I think is you know, one of the terms that certainly my book, a lot of book clubs read my book. And I think it's because of connecting with the characters. I think it's that going on a character's journey with them. As I said, I have had my share of mistakes and missteps. And so you know, I love reading about a character's journey, because, you know, I love that kind of like, well, what would I do if I were her or him? And so that's what I'm drawn to. And like, even in my book, if you would tell someone in 30 seconds what's going on in this marriage, if you'd say, this woman, she married this guy, he's doing this and that, you know, in 30 seconds, you'd say, well, leave him. The guy's an a-hole. Like, what are you doing? But as we know, life isn't that simple. It's not, you know, there are lots of things that go into our decisions. And my protagonist, you know, she has a very large family and they're Italian. So they're all in each other's business. And she's got things that happened in, you know, to her parents. And so that, you know, she wants to, you know, she's the oldest girl in the Italian family. So she's kind of the rock. And so she, you know, everybody sort of depends on her. And, you know, then she has children. And so there's just all these factors that, you know, it's not that easy to just say, well, oh, this is what you should do. You know, that's a no-brainer. And I think that's what I read a lot. I love authors. I mean, I can name off the top of my head, I can name a lot of women's fiction or contemporary fiction, book club fiction authors. But that's the kind of book that I'm drawn to, where it's kind of real people going through real situations, you know, messing up, you know, trying to stumble through life, doing the best they can, usually, you know, messing up along the way. But you know, that's sort of that kind of thing where you're thinking about them after you finish the book, and you're kind of like, oh, you know, or even as you're going through, like, okay, so here's another reason they're not doing this, or here's another layer to why this is so complicated, you know, because I think that, you know, marriage and family and, you know, especially there's a lot of mother-child, mother-daughter relationship stuff in my book, and that's all very complex. It's not easy. And so I think that I write in this genre because it's the genre that not only that I love to read, but I feel like it's the genre that I live.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, your book got published. What was it like to get it in your hands?
To get the copy of my book in my hand.
Yes, yeah, like,
oh my gosh, it's like I felt like I was pregnant with this book for like 7 years, and then I gave birth to it, and now I have to figure out how to raise it. But it was really, really cool. And I know that sounds juvenile, but it was so cool. Right when the first box of books shows up, and you open it up and you see your name on there. So it is actually like it's just really, really cool, because it's not, you think okay, I wrote the book, I'm done, that was easy, okay, good, I'll just walk in the bookstores and people will just be in there buying millions of copies. Oh, not so. It's
they weren't just sitting there lined up. What do you
lined up?
mean?
No, the bookstores were not clamoring to have like 100 copies each. Go figure. I don't know what's wrong with them.
How weird is that?
No, right? So, so I had to learn about the business of it too. So finally getting it, because it's years of work, so writing it, let alone the noise in my head, let's just say from when I sat down to start actually writing it at the end of my master's program. So it was 2016, finished in 2018-ish, so I decided, I was going to try the traditional route, right? I thought I'm just going to, the big 5, and they have 1,000 imprints.
Yeah.
And I actually have my sister's best friend works in the book publicity business. So she was kind of guiding me. And I said, I'd like to try to do this the traditional way. And so I sat down and started querying agents.
Okay.
And I always say, like, I don't know if I can really simulate or articulate the experience of writing to these agents, but if you want it, something close would be maybe if you would just get like a cheese grater and shave your head with it. I think that maybe the sensation is maybe a little bit close to that.
So
it was like rejection at boom, 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 rejection after rejection. But they were really nice rejections. Some of them were lovely. I mean, some of them I wanted to send them flowers. They were just such lovely rejections, but they were no's just the same. But this friend of my sister said, you know what? You're getting good rejection, if there is such a thing. It wasn't like, this is garbage, no one will ever read it kind of rejections. It was like, this is really interesting. It's not for me right now. I'll be interested to see where this ends up, yada, yada, yada. But in the end, they were still rejections. So I thought that you either found an agent with one of these publishing houses, or you self-published and you sold books out of the trunk of your car. I had no idea there was anything in between. And then my sister's friend told me about indie publishing and hybrid publishing. And so I started to research this publishing model. And, my sister's friend said, one of the standard bearers in indie publishing is She Writes Press. So if you can get her to take a look at it. So I wrote to her name's Brooke Warner at She Writes. And I wrote to a couple others, and a couple of them actually said, hey, yes, we'd like to publish it. And I was ready to hit send to sign with a different hybrid or small indie publisher. And I got an email from Brooke saying, hey, we'd like to publish your novel. So I was like, so that's who I went with. And so it's actually, mine is actually Spark Press. So she has two, they're sister companies.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so that's who I went with. And like I said, I knew nothing about indie publishing at all. So it's been a learning curve. It's been a lot of learning the business of, getting a book out there, because, you finish, you hit that last, period, the end, and you just think the next day, the band's going to be playing and the parade in the streets and, the confetti and no, there's a lot to be done after that.
Oh yeah, no, I agree 1000% on that.
That's when the real work begins.
You're
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I think you're right. I think it was actually more work finding representation and then, getting it out there, putting it together, the cover, the editing, all the, the beta readers and all that kind of thing. I think that was actually even more work than writing the book.
Oh, really?
I think so. And maybe because I really had a really solid idea for this first book. So I really knew the story. And I love to write. And, so it was time consuming. And believe me, as I said, there were days where I was like, what am I doing? But for the most part, writing the book was, I would say less work than getting it out there, finding representation and getting it out there.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I think a lot of people run into that and run into, like, it is daunting, especially if you decide to go traditional, which is totally fine.
Oh, sure.
It takes a lot of research also to find all the different presses that are out there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That was a full-time job. I mean, I probably wrote to I can't swear to it, but I'm sure I wrote to over 100 agents. But you have to research, you're right. You have to research, okay, which imprints are taking women's fiction, book club fiction. And then it's like, well, they want you have to query them in exactly the way. It's like they almost dare you to query them. It's like we want the letter in this format, this many paragraphs, and we want a synopsis. We don't want a synopsis. We want a chapter. We don't want a chapter. We want comparable titles. We don't want, so it's kind of like every agent
Formula.
Yes. And you have to exactly stick to that formula. Then you have to track them, because some of them will tell you either way, but some of them will say, if you don't hear from us by such date. So then you have to kind of, you have to sort of track what, who have you heard from? Then you'll hear from some who say, and I had a bunch of them, which was kind of what kept me going, who was like, all right, I'll bite, give me the first couple chapters, or send me the manuscript, so, and then again, you have to keep following up. And
if you don't follow up, they actually like throw you to the side because you didn't follow up. So your book could have been great.
Right.
But because you didn't follow that one little step, they threw you away because they don't want to present you to the house, because they don't know then if you're going to follow through with them. So you still could have had a good manuscript, but because you missed one little step, or on page 3, your name was still up in the corner, because when you have queried with somebody else, you left your name up there, they throw it out. I mean, the gatekeepers, it's ridiculous.
They are, they're very particular.
Yep.
So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily realize that when they're looking at things, is how much the onus is on you as the author to do things versus the agents or whatever. There are not a lot of agents that are sitting around going, I have a shortage of authors. I should figure out something to do about that.
Yes. And that's why they're so willing to just kind of, kick you aside if you don't do everything to the letter.
Oh yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah. And I think people don't realize also exactly what you just said, the amount of work for the author. It's not like you just kind of say, oh, good, I got representation. Now you just take it from here and, get it out there. What I found is that, so with indie publishing, the author pays the publisher, as you know. And it's not like, okay, my life is over kind of money, but it's also not nothing. So, you've got skin in the game. But what I found was that the publicity, I really thought long and hard about where to spend money. Because I always like to say, I think my new favorite line, I say, I think I figured out how to make a small fortune publishing a book. You start with a large fortune.
I love that. Unfortunately, that's true.
Right.
Yep.
But I honestly think, and so you might say, really, was it worth it? Because have you made your money back yet? The answer is no. But your book is not a quart of milk. It's not going to expire. So
Yeah.
for me, I was never on social media because I was a teacher. And so of course that was discouraged. So I really didn't have a social media presence. So I could sell 100 books, but I didn't want to sell 100 books. I wanted to sell lots of books. So I hired the in-house publicity team for She Writes. And it's expensive, but they have very far-reaching tentacles. And, you know, they worked very hard and they got me, you know, they got me spots on shows and podcasts. And, you know, they had, you know, wrote guest posts and blogs for different publications. They get it in nationally syndicated publications. So, you know, things that I would have never, ever had access to. Now, does that translate to sales? Well, we'll see. You know, the book just came out in June, you know, hope springs eternal. But, you know, again, that's why the Bookish Road Trip is so great, because that's where, you know, at some point I'm like, okay, I have saturated my social media with this book. Like, I think when my social media friends see this book cover, they want to throw up all over their shoes, because they're like, okay, already, we bought the
We
book.
get it.
We know about the book. Shut up about the book. So I needed to bother more people. So I figured, what better way to do that than to join a Facebook marketing group for readers and writers and travelers. And so that, you know, that's been really great, because that, you know, again, that's sort of those tentacles that I don't have, you know, that can just kind of keep the conversation alive until I can give birth to my next book.
I love that. You know, it's every author has to find the right journey for themselves. So and I will say this, you know, I often talk about not spending money to publish your book, but sometimes, especially in certain circumstances, that's where you have to go in order to do that. You're going to spend the money somewhere. Sometimes you can find a publisher, but it also has to be the right fit and what you're comfortable with.
Right.
Do not spend the money on things if you don't have the money or you're not comfortable with that process.
Right.
Because then that's not fair. And you don't have to spend the money to get your book published. It just, different situations, you know, warrant different things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I'm asked to speak at groups sometimes. And that's one of the things that I always, because there are always some aspiring writers in the crowd, you know. And so when they say, oh, I want to be a writer, first I say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, I always tell them, listen, you have to know what your publishing goals are, because my publishing goals might not be yours. And so I can tell you what I did, and I can tell you why I did what I did. I can tell you what I would do the same next time or differently next time, but I can't tell you what your publishing goals are. So you have to figure that out, and then do the research to figure out what path and what publishing model and so forth is right for you. Because you're so right. It's different for everyone.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. But let's talk about reviews for a moment. So you had publishers, publicists, and PR people helping you. What if are you a review reader?
Do my own reviews?
Do you read
Yes.
your reviews?
Yes. So reviews are so important. And another thing I did not realize. So I harangue everyone. No, I don't harangue. All right, I harangue. I say, you know,
I was going to
please-
say, I can guarantee you harangue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think I harangue? Do I seem like a
You
harangue?
have the look of a haranguer on you.
Yeah, I can.
You
I
are
can-
an
I can
English
harangue.
teacher. Of course you harangue.
I
Yeah,
can
I
harangue with the best of them. But, you know, it's so important because, again, you know, I didn't understand. I always say my new best friend, algorithm. I had no idea about this stuff, you know. And I never was one to review products, but now I do. I review products, only positively though. I never write bad. Now I shouldn't say that. I haven't ever written a bad review. I would, but it would have to be such a circumstance where like someone was actually harmed for me to, you know, like I'm not going to be the
Yeah.
person who goes to the restaurant that's normally very good, but you get one soggy asparagus spear and then you go on, you know, you trash the restaurant. Like I'm not that person. And I never write a bad book review. If I did not like a book, I would not review it. But I do read my reviews. Now, in the beginning, in June, of course, you read every one, you know, and now, you know, of course, things have slowed down. I was so happy. A few months ago, I hit 100 reviews, which was really exciting. But you know, other authors have told me, stay off of Goodreads, stay off of like, don't read the reviews. But I do read them, you know, but the thing of it is, I've gotten only 1 or 2 star reviews. And those are the ones, they're the ones that get you. Like, I want to call the person and be like, what are you talking about?
Well,
You know?
here's what I will say though. You are also a 7th grade English teacher. Your skin is a little thicker than most, right?
True.
I am quite
true.
sure no matter how great of a teacher you are, you have had many fun conversations with your students who are in different places, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially come grading time, or
Yeah.
I don't know, plagiarism
Maybe
time.
the parents.
Yeah,
Parents, yes.
parents, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, reviews are important, but reviews are actually for readers, not necessarily the author.
I know. And that's why my author friends say, just don't even read them.
Yeah.
I had one review where the person said, and this one stuck with me, and the person said, this author obviously only has a lifetime movie experience with like addiction and abandonment. And I wanted to say, oh, but you're so wrong. I actually have very real life experience with some of these things. And so, what that told me was, obviously, to that person, I did not come across as authentic. But that's why they tell you not to read them, because that's the one that sticks in my head. All the glowing ones, I love them and I'm so grateful for them. But those are the ones that stick in your head. But you do have to have thick skin. You have to have very thick skin.
Madonna said
no,
something like that too, though. She said something like, if the record execs were in the front row and there's 100 of them, she said, and they're smiling, they're cheering, they're clapping. She goes, I remember the one who's sitting there with a scowl on his face. She's
Isn't
like, it's
that
happened
true?
before.
It's so
She's
true.
like, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And I hate to say this, but you'll never know what that person's actually thinking versus
Yeah,
what
And what
they
their
said.
life is.
And
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And you don't know maybe what they've gone through, and maybe something in the book kind of landed wrong with them, which, obviously I don't ever want that, but I can't control that. I can't control that. So
no, it's true. What about you? Do you write reviews for books?
I do all the time.
Will you give a low star review?
No, I won't
What's
do
the
it.
lowest you will go to?
4 stars.
4 stars the lowest?
4 is the lowest, because if I'm not going to give it now, if a person asks me to read and review their book, which I've had happen, thank goodness I have liked those books, because I just won't do it. I just know what it takes to just sit down and pour your heart out and write a book and get it to the point where someone is reviewing it. And again, before I would write a bad review, I won't review it. I just won't do it.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
nice of you.
I am trying to get to heaven. So maybe that, I don't know, maybe that's going to get me one step closer. But I just, and the other thing that I've really come to understand, especially meeting and getting to know whether, meeting virtually, or, as I've said, meeting some in person. When I'm reading someone's writing, I can see the blood, sweat, and tears in the writing, and it would have to be really bad for me to give it a low review, which, I've had books and I read constantly. There's never a time where I'm not reading a book. And so I always, I'm always reading. I'm constantly, but I can hear the person's voice, and it might not be exactly the way I write, but that's them. And so, if it's a good story, if I can connect with it, my mom and I trade books a lot, and we like a lot of the same books. And my mom will never not finish a book.
Oh, see,
Even
I learned a while ago to get that time of my life back.
Yeah, because there are too many books that I want to read, but she's kind of like, oh, I'm just going to give it a chance. I think that it's going to get better. I'm like, Mom, it's not going to get better. And she'll kvetch about it through the entire book, but she won't not read it. But she'll say to me, I'm not even giving this one to you because I know you're not going to like it, but she'll finish it. But I've learned that I have too many books that I want to read to read a book that I don't like. But again, I would never, ever go on any of the platforms and trash it or give it a low review. I won't do that. I'll just stop reading it, donate it or whatever and move on. I won't do it. I won't write a bad review.
What about were these people that are asking you to do a review?
As I said, fortunately, those people, I have liked their books. So I could genuinely give them, a good review. And it's so flattering. One of my colleagues who actually published her first book exactly a year before mine with She Writes is now with a small press. And she has asked me to be one of her early readers and write a review. And it's just, to me, it's so flattering that somebody would even, want me to do that. And I've been asked to write a blurb, which again, that's the highest praise to me, that another author would want me to write a blurb, because you ask people, when you ask someone to write a blurb for you, you're really on bended knee, right? Because people are busy, these authors are so busy. And so you're basically saying, can you take time out of your life, not only read this book, but then write a blurb that I actually want to be on, the back of my book. And so, and that's the other thing. I've had a few authors reach out and say, hey, if you write another book, I'll write a blurb for you. And again, to me, that is like, that's like Billy Joel telling you you're a great piano player. It's like, it's so, I just am so honored, but I'm so humbled by it. And so that is why I just will not write a bad review. I won't.
No, and I don't think you should necessarily ever write a bad review, but I do think that if there's a problem with the book, if you don't like it, it's not your cup of tea. Absolutely, just put it on the shelf, put it in a freebie library, whatever,
right.
Because it may be somebody else's cup of tea. It
right.
probably is, right? But if there's something wrong with the book, like their editing is off, or you find a bunch of errors. And by the way, everybody who's listening, you're going to find errors in a book. No matter what you do, no matter how many times it's proofread, there will be errors. But if you find a large quantity or something, I would reach out to the author and go,
I was just going to say, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think if that were the case, because I would think if that's the case, I would almost think it's self-published. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but because, I think editors will catch that kind of thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but if it's riddled with errors, I think I would reach out to the author. And say, hey, this is, I can't in good conscience highly recommend this because of this. Maybe the story is good, but if it's riddled with, especially like I said, I am in recovery, but I am an English teacher, so like I can't, that's something for me I don't know, if you read my book and find an error, please let me know, because I've read it 10,000 times and had other people look at it. And that's like a dagger to the heart for me. And you're going to find, like you said, you're going to find a period missing or a word missing or a misplaced comma. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something with tons of errors, but 100%, I agree with you. I would reach out to the author in that case and let them know why I can't in good conscience, give it a good review.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the right thing to do. Okay. It is shameless self-promotion time, my friend. Talk about your book, where people can find it, and how do people find you on social media?
So again, my book is called A Week of Warm Weather. It is, I think it's considered, like I said, contemporary book club fiction. It is available, as we say in the biz, wherever books are sold online. So Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. Support your indie bookstores, people. I'm all over social media. And so I'm on Facebook, it's just my name, Lee Bukowski. On Instagram, it's I'm Lee Bukowski author. I do have a website that my very talented daughter made for me. So leebukowski.com. Anytime you see anything out there that is like, that's okay, I did it. When you see something that is like fabulous, that means my daughter, and I also have a niece who helps me. But leebukowski.com is my website, which my very talented daughter made for me. That has everything about me, events. It has some, blog posts that I've written, articles that I've written, buying options, events if you happen to be in my area. But I love visiting book clubs. I visited many in person. I visit them virtually. So at leebukowski.com, you can find all my social media, handles. Is that a word? Is that what
Yeah.
they call it? Okay, look at me knowing the lingo.
Look at how fancy you're getting.
Right,
Woo.
right. But yeah, so I really hope that your listeners will check out my book.
I'm sure they will. They do. So thank you so much for being on this podcast with us.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. Can I just tell you, this was a blast. And I do have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
At the risk of
Hold on,
sounding
let me get my
ignorant.
drink ready. Go.
Yeah,
I was
get the
gonna
mead
say,
ready,
at the
Erica.
risk
Get
of
the
sounding
mead.
ignorant, what is mead? What is that you're drinking?
So I already know that Danielle's going to do a better descriptor than I'm going to. So I'm going to start and then let Danielle correct me on this because she's better at this than me. So mead is actually sort of based on like fermented honey and stuff like that. It's a much sweeter, it's not wine, but it's a much sweeter sort of alcoholic drink that they used to drink all the time before. Like there was wine, there was mead. There wasn't as much beer as people think from the movies and stuff. It was more you drank wine or you drink mead. And mead, I think, was like the lower class people's beverage of choice in general.
Is that right?
You got it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well,
She
and
got
you
it.
know what? Now that you say that, I think where was I? I was in the Finger Lakes. And you know how they have those like pop up or whatever, like kind of, I can't think of the word, like not festivals, but like markets that you can kind of walk through in different stands.
Oh yeah.
And I think there were some that had mead and I didn't know what it was. And now I do. And now I learned something. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, totally. I love mead. One of the authors, and I'm not going to do him justice now that I've drunk that entire cup because I can feel it. But he even told me about this Viking blood mead, and you can get it. Your local wine stores is where I found it. Your liquor stores too, you can ask. But there are a lot of the breweries and stuff like that have connections to mead places. So if you get a chance to try the mead, if they have different sizes though, start with the smaller size because this hits you kind of the way like I almost said cocaine, but I meant champagne. Woo.
And we're done.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a totally different podcast. Oh my God. But the way champagne can kind of hit you, where it's not like you're drinking so much more of it, but it definitely sneaks up and attacks you. So yeah.
Okay. That's
There's
good
my
advice.
answer.
That's useful advice,
Yes. See, look, Danielle, I gave you
And that's what
advice.
we're here for. You did. And that's what we're here for. And scene. Good. You know what, Erica? End it there. You ended on a good note. Don't go any further.
I am. I'm just saying our goodbyes.
Right? Just checking.
I'm working on it. This has been Drinking with Authors, by the way. I'm being cut off by my co-host, the amazing Danielle Orsino.
Don't forget to like and subscribe because we know that you're right there. You're either watching or listening, so hit that button.
Yes. And learn more drinking tips from Erica and Danielle. Lee, it's been amazing having you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.